Hidden Unity, French Esoteric Christianity and the Western Path to Non-Duality is a new book by James Foster. I believe it's self-published, although there is a publication company listed, which is KDF Media. I can just see it popping through the page there. KDF Media. I don't know whether that actually belongs to James Foster, PhD, or not. But what I can say to his great credit is that I didn't find a single typo here, which is unusual even for books that have been published by larger publishing companies, right? So this is James Foster, and those of you who are familiar with the works of Matt Oren might have had the pleasure of listening to the audiobook of Psychic Witch. And this is actually James Foster who read Psychic Witch. And, he decided to publish a book about Martinism. And to my shame, I knew very little about Martinism, excuse me. I knew something about Martinism. I had read books pertaining to Martinism, but after reading this, I have a very firm grasp, I think, of at least the concepts underpinning Martinism and its history, which is exactly what the book is supposed to do and does exceedingly well. I'm very, very impressed, I have to say. So for those of you who, like me, are not familiar with Martinism, it's essentially a Western non-dual philosophy based in Christianity. So in the same way as you have esoteric forms of many world religions, the esoteric forms of Christianity that I was mostly aware of were mostly, I'm going to say, offshoots of Gnosticism. And while Gnosticism is a very strong part of Martinism, it's not a Gnosticism that that rejects the material world. It is, in fact, a non-dual philosophy, which Gnosticism actually isn't, right? And, certainly Sethian Gnosticism suggests that the world is evil and the spirit world is good. Whereas no, Martinism does say it is all one. And that is deeply attractive to me. I like that very, very much. So what are we getting here? First of all, as I was saying, I think it's self-published, and the one thing that I'm going to say as a tiny negative is that there is no table of contents, and that's kind of a tiny disappointment, and it's the only one, which is quite cool, right? So you get a preface, and then we just giving it an outline of what Martinism is and the reason why James Foster, PhD, decided to write the book, and then we get straight in with what reintegration is and the concept of reintegration into of the self into source, right, or of the soul back to source, or rather the realization that the self always is source, right? There's no return, but rather an encouragement to realize what has always been. And then once the basic concepts have been explained, we get into the history of Martinism. So talking a little bit about the precursors who came before the what you could call the two founders, really, of Martinism, being Martinez de Pascaly, who gets a full chapter number 3, and then chapter number 4 is dedicated to Louis-Claude de Saint-Martin. So you could say the second founder. Together their work forms the heart of Martinism. And then, and then the rest of the book goes age after age into the various French occultists who took on the philosophies of these two esoteric Christians and added value to this current. And some of it I really love. Obviously, it becomes an organized spiritual organization, an organized religion, and with it comes all the kinds of pitfalls that one might decry, that I certainly decry. But what's wonderful is that while the core of the book never really suggests that you should go it alone, it exposes the philosophies so beautifully and so clearly, and points to the value of every aspect that has been added onto it. Whether it be a particularly spiritual aspect, or a particularly political aspect, or a particularly social aspect, and so on and so forth. There is value to it all, and the author is very, very respectful of it all. And so this goes on for the majority of the book, where you are getting further and further techniques that have been added, philosophies that have been added, aspects that have been added, and so on. And so you're getting philosophy and history simultaneously. And then you get to the very end of the book, at which point you get some really nice methods that you can try for yourself. So after this epilogue, let me see. Am I going to get to it? Yeah, there we go. Appendix, open practices of the way of the heart, centering prayer and the prayer of stillness. So that's the first appendix. Those of you who've been following me for a while might be aware of the prayer of the heart. Did I actually review a book called Centering Prayer? Maybe I reviewed it. Anyway, it's an extraordinary practice that is nicely described here. I'm going to say that I was maybe surprised that there was one aspect to this centering prayer that I didn't really find, which was the idea that when you're doing centering prayer, this is what I understood from the previous book that I'd read about this practice, right? That when you're doing centering prayer, you're supposed to exist within your heart. So basically, bring your consciousness into your heart. So rather than having your consciousness up in your brain, just bring it down into your heart. So I thought that was a major part of centering prayer, which I maybe I missed it, but I didn't find it here. But the rest of the practice is very clear here. And then there is another appendix which talks about the 10 ox herding pictures from Zen. And I really like the way the author suggests that this isn't Zen pretending to be Christianity, and this isn't Christianity pretending to be Zen, but rather Martinism using the language of Zen to describe the process of reintegration, which is the whole point of Martinism, right? Or réintégration, right? So there we are. So a really, really nice, very complete overview of Martinism that should really give anyone interested in Martinism a very good idea of what it's all about. So that you can make a decision on whether you'd like to be initiated or not, which is quite cool. And the author does say, just try to find out if there are any Martinist orders nearby, and if there aren't, then there are plenty of ways of developing a Martinist practice without necessarily joining a Martinist order, which I really appreciate as well. There we go, folks. That's my general overview of Hidden Unity, French Esoteric Christianity and the Western Path to Non-Duality by James Foster. I'm a fan. There we go. I hope you enjoyed the review. Don't forget to leave a thumbs up, subscribe down below if you haven't done so already. I will see you very soon with another video. Take care. Bye-bye.